Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the HR Tech Chat video podcast. And with us today, we have Nicole Davies, who is Vice President of Talent Optimization at Valet Living. That's right. Oh, mind print. We'll leave that in. We'll leave that in. Vice President of Talent Optimization at Valet Living, which is an incredibly interesting organization. And we're going to talk a little bit today around her use of the solution Quantum Workplace. It's really fascinating. We've had a conversation previously about this offline, Nicole, and I'm just really excited for this episode. So if you'd like to just kind of give our audience a little bit of a background on who you are, and again, thank you, and in the organization as well, and thank you again for joining us.
Of course. Hi, Brent. Happy to be here. As you shared, I'm Nicole Davies. I'm the VP of Talent Optimization, and that is all encompassing of, things associated with employee experience, or as we call it, associate experience. So learning and development. We've got talent management. We've got performance management. We've got succession planning. All the good stuff, all the fun and exciting pieces of human resources land in my area. And I do work for Valet Living, which is a company you may or may not have had experience with. We are in 40 states. But we support mostly folks who live in apartment buildings, so the multifamily housing industry. And we do all the stuff people don't necessarily have time for or want to do for themselves. So it may be everything from handling their trash or their recycling to package delivery to walking your dog, cleaning your apartment, all those wonderful things that are going to give you time back in your day. And we do that with a workforce of almost 9,000 people, of which 8,000 of them are part-time associates. So very heavy part-time employee population at Valet Living.
Yeah. I love the concept of valet living. It's really cool. We didn't have that. Last time I lived in a multifamily was many years ago, and I don't think valet living existed, or maybe it wasn't where I was. Definitely could have used the help of valet living more than once. How long has the organization been around?
We are about 27, about to turn 28 years old, believe it or not, but we actually like to say we're still in startup mindset. We're constantly evolving. Initially it was simply a trash service. It was a doorstep trash collection. When you opened your apartment door at night, you just slip that can right outside the door. Somebody would sneak by in the evenings, collect that, take it down to the dumpster or compactor, and voila, you'd have a fresh can the next morning. And of course, it's just been evolving from there. So it went from that very basic concept 27, almost 28 years ago, to what it is today, which is a full-scale amenity service provider for the multifamily housing industry.
Wow, that's fantastic. So 27 years, that actually I would have fallen inside that time frame. So that's as close as we'll get to my age on this particular podcast today.
Mine too.
Now the 8,000, you said around 8,000 of the 9,000 employees are part-time associates. These are the folks who actually do the services, carry out the services. And I know that, from our previous conversation, I know that you guys had sort of a sort of an low technology kind of situation previously for doing some pretty important things around talent management. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So one of the things we pride ourselves on is being a tech-enabled service, right? So our valets, when they're out there on site, they're using very fancy technology called iValet that we've developed to let us know where they are on the property. What are they doing? Where are they? Which building are they in? So we had this great tech solution that allowed us to know things about them. But then on the people side of things, we were very low tech. We really had no great way for them to be able to have engaging conversations with their leaders, or to even really know what was happening within the company. And so we thought, we can't be a tech enabled service where we've got this wonderful, technology that we tout when we go into these properties, and then not have some great way for our folks to be able to feed back to us on what the experience is like. And so when I came on board in 2017, one of the big moves we made was to partner with Quantum Workplace, which gave us an opportunity to have that common conversation tool, one place, one-stop shopping, so to speak, where folks could go if they wanted to learn about, how they're doing from a performance perspective, all the way through to opportunities to continue to grow and develop from a succession planning perspective.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to get to succession planning a little bit because there's some really cool stuff happening around there. But one of the things that sort of springs to mind for me is that this is really a branding thing also for you. Even though it's for the internal employees, you want your employer brand to align. You want there to be as little cognitive dissonance there between what your employer brand is and what your consumer brand is. And you're absolutely right, just maybe to underscore what you've already said, but to have that sort of high tech, sort of modern consumer brand. You don't want to give your employees, the people who are delivering that service, you want them to have a sort of a similarly modern experience in their employment.
Exactly. I mean, think about, as I shared, we service almost 2 million doors a day. So 2 million apartment homes a day across 40 plus states with 8,000 plus people, right? And because of that, we don't have 40 states worth of brick and mortar buildings. We don't have 8,000 places where folks can go and say, I work there. They go to these different apartments every day. And so the experience was, maybe your manager would come with a Valet Living truck that had a little sticker on the side, but their entire experience before we really broadened the perspective through the partnership with Quantum was, I meet Bob. Bob's my manager. Bob rolled up in this truck and asked me to fill out some paperwork. And I may or may not know anything more really about the Valet Living story or brand or organization opportunities beyond what I hear or see in that interaction with Bob. And so we really needed an opportunity for them to more deeply engage with us. And the technology was the easy way to get that lift.
That's a great point. You want those employees to have like a multifaceted. You don't want them to have just one node where that's almost all their engagement with a company. You want to kind of like maybe sort of wrap around. You want to have sort of wraparound experience for them. Absolutely. That's a huge deal. Now when you decided to work with Quantum Workplace, maybe could you share a little bit more around, you did give a really great top line there, but maybe share a little bit more around why you chose Quantum Workplace, and what was it what were some of the and maybe some of the immediate effects, positive effects that you saw after deploying, and maybe what implementation was like?
Sure. So I think our friends at Quantum would probably say the main kind of loss leader that gets folks to give them a call and consider their technology is that, world-class employee engagement survey. We call ours associate engagement survey. So that was certainly something that we thought, gosh, we have complete room to improve in that area. But why I came to Quantum was because we wanted a tool to be able to have consistent, regular feed forward. So thinking about the future, performance related conversations. And what we had prior to that was, a pretty cumbersome annual review process. Probably lots of folks that are listening have had that same experience where you have to recall what happened in February when you're writing the review in December,
Yeah.
and everything in between. And what we found is most of the time, not only was it a painful experience for our managers and the associates, we had a lot of surprise. People didn't realize that they had been missing expectations, or maybe had a bobble in the business that they didn't know about, and they would see it at year end and be totally caught off guard and felt like, gosh, what an unfortunate situation, because if we'd been able to make a micro correction in the moment, we could have probably solved a lot of heartache for the associate and the manager. And so that was what brought us to Quantum. They have a wonderful one-on-one tool. And the way that one-on-one tool works for us, Brent, is that we every first of the month, so just today, our team on the talent optimization side launches a performance-based discussion between a manager and associate. We pick topics that range from well-being to professional development to what's happening over the next 30 days in the business, getting aligned with the goals of the company. And both the associate and the manager weigh in. So they weigh in written form, they add their thoughts around the questions that we've queued up, and then they have a conversation to say, what did you think? Here's my thoughts. Am I on track? Is this aligned with, or, a little bit different than what you think? And
Mhm.
it gives that manager and that associate one an opportunity to build a deeper relationship, and trust is the foundation of success, as we know, between
Yeah.
manager and associate and retention, from a retention perspective. And it makes sure that we stay on track when there's never that potential for folks to say, I don't know what's expected of me, or I don't know what I should be doing with my time, or, I feel like my manager never tells me what he or she thinks about my performance. We eliminate all of that noise by really having them have those directed monthly conversations.
Yeah.
So, Quantum had me at hello, so to speak, on those one-on-one conversations. And then once we had great success with that, we just built upon that to use some of the other tools in their technology cadre there.
Oh, that's fantastic. Not to overstate it, but that if you have an antiquated or a, let's not say antiquated, because a lot of people still do, the annual performance review and that's it, but it's sort of uh, it's an anachronism today. It was developed over 70 years ago during a time when it was, people were sort of just figuring out, okay, how are we going to measure people's performance? Oh, based on sort of predicated on a preconceived notion of what the manager-employee relationship should be, or the full extent of it, and it creates sort of a in what's the word, an inefficient or an unproductive, or maybe ineffective sort of top down, sort of taskmaster sort of relationship there that doesn't really capture much of, it captures only a narrow slice of the manager employee relationship. So it can perpetuate maybe a dysfunctional relationship between managers and employees. It doesn't have to be there. One of the things that was really interesting about what you said is giving Quantum Workplace gives you the opportunity, or the opportunity, and enables you to do course corrections, micro corrections in the moment. We hear about real time. We keep hearing about real time, and I mean, to me, this is emblematic of that. Being able to make those adjustments in the flow of work, regarding that manager-employee relationship, to keep things on track, and then of course minimizing the occurrence of situations that need micro corrections, right? Those are just some of the things that I'm hearing, and you mentioned the world-class employee engagement survey, which I've already, it's escaping me what you call it at your organization, but it sounds like Quantum Workplace gives you the opportunity to sort of rebrand it for yourselves internally. And I do know that there was a lot of improvement year over year from the last year that was pre-Quantum Workplace to the first year of Quantum Workplace being, no pun intended, in place. um, Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because there were some interesting numbers there, I know.
Yeah. It's so, prior to the partnership with Quantum Workplace, we were using pretty much a homegrown tool, right? Trying to figure out what are those right questions to ask to really get at manager effectiveness, communication efficiency, the trust in leadership. And what Quantum did for us through using their tool, which is, the best places to work series of questions. So we're getting not only, great questions, but we're getting to validate them against their book of business to say, how are folks like us doing with these things? Are we on track? Are we off track? At a 80% manager effectiveness score, where does that stack up compared to some of our peers? And that was data that we didn't have visibility to before. But you're right. We, in my area, of course, my heart always sings around those manager effectiveness questions, because they do ask things like, I feel like my manager has my best interests in mind. I feel like my manager helps me with my growth and development. I feel like my manager, is clear in setting performance expectations for me. Questions like that really help to get to the heart of the value of those monthly, very specific performance-based conversations. And we've seen year over year improvement from from the time that we started our partnership with Quantum, but a significant improvement between at the end of year one coming into year two.
Yeah.
So, it was a, 8-10 point jumps in some cases on some
Uh,
of questions. And our last set of data were just today, or yesterday, we launched our associate engagement survey for this year. So I'll have to report back on how we do, how we're doing for 2022. But for 2021, we had, lower 80s to mid 80s
mm,
percentage effectiveness scores, or happiness scores, whatever you want to call them, associates feeling like they're seen and valued and heard by their managers. And so I think that's pretty darn good.
yeah, it is.
A very dispersed 40, very part-time population.
Yeah. Uh, Now, you those are great numbers. We mentioned something, you said something around succession planning and how I know that, let's see if I can recall just top line that some of the positions that you need filled on a regular basis at Valet Living, you were maybe going outside externally and bringing people in, and it wasn't necessary, and it was tough. Um, I'm trying to remember here. It was tough to sort of really pick the right people, and you've been finding that you've been able to sort of strengthen your internal pipeline for those types of roles. What are those types of roles? What does that look like? Maybe you could share an example of when sort of the light went off in your head. You said, "Oh, I can be doing this with Quantum Workplace as well."
Yes, of course. So you are right. We have about a 350 person full-time district manager position. And many of those district managers are overseeing those valets that are, out there doing the package delivery, the pet walking, the recycling and collection. And in the past, we never really created intentional conversation around a partnership. A lot of those district managers saw those service valets as somebody that comes to work, Monday through Thursday for 3 hours a night. And that's the relationship we have with them. But when we created these intentional conversations that focused around what are your career aspirations, and is there a bigger role that you may have or want to consider with Valet Living, it gave our DMs two opportunities. One, a chance to really promote and help folks to understand that the company's bigger than that 2 or 3 hour a night job that they were doing.
Yeah.
And two, give that associate a chance to say, like, hey, how do I get in deeper? Is there more? And so we ended up really finding a wonderful pipeline to your point of talent through being able to have those conversations. And so many of our service valets raising their hands saying, yes, I'd like to be considered. If there's an opening in my area, please let me know and let me have an opportunity to apply. And we've seen, I want to say the number, and I could be getting it wrong by a percentage point or two, but 37 or so, 40,
Okay.
almost % of our folks we're coming from those internal part-time service valet positions into that full-time district manager role. And if we think about that from a recruiting cost perspective, it's an incredible, one, time saver, but two, money saver, because we're not having to spend all the dollars to have those recruiters out there, trying to advertise for and find those individuals.
Yeah, there's a lot of excuse me, a frog in my throat. There's a lot of potentially avoidable cost around talent acquisition when you get better at internal hiring, right? You get more precise with your external hiring. You end up engaging in external hiring only when it's really necessary. That happens as you get to know your internal organization better, which just can't happen without the right sort of technology in place, and the sort of the attendant HR transformation, which I think we're seeing with your department, which is really exciting, right?
I want to just double click on that, because I will tell you the days have passed. I'm going to show my age a little with HR. We would have to manage succession by a spreadsheet, who's where, who's willing to go to what city or town, what roles do they want to have, right? And it was often disconnected from the performance tools. So there was no easy way to say, Brent wants more and he's willing to go places, but is he capable? Does he have a development plan in place? What are his performance reviews looking like? And so when Quantum just finally, is able to kind of sync them all together, we now go to one place. In the past, I was working from 8 different sets of data, trying to be able to tell our leaders when they said, hey, we have an opening in Tampa, who's ready? I'm like, give me an hour, right, to go find all together. And
Wow.
now, we can proactively go in, and we do that with every manager in our company. We say, identify your high performers, and they go through the process of letting us know, hey, we've got this person sitting in Houston and this person sitting in Dallas. And then we actively collect data on them. So we find out what are their career aspirations, where do they want to go? We've got that then in a tile in Quantum Workplace where we can see their last performance reviews, we can see development plans, we can see those thoughts around succession planning from the manager's perspective. And it just allows us to be so much more dynamic, so that when we do have those needs develop, or we know there's an opportunity coming, or a senior leader says, tell me. And this is what's really cool now, Brent, and I get super excited about it. I'll have a senior leader call and say, tell me about my talent. What's happening in the organization? How many folks do I have that are looking for and want to do more within the organization? And so they're being much more proactive about identifying and recognizing and trying to actively track those folks along a career path, where in the past it was just too darn difficult to easily enable them with that data to be able to make those types of leadership decisions.
So you've become much more of a strategic partner to leadership.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
a trusted advisor on those things, because we are digging deep. We're actively looking at, for every one of our associates that's been identified as high potential, what are the developmental needs? What does the next 60 days look like? What does the next 6 months look like for this person? And if it's, coursework that we can then bring in our learning team to deploy or to design to support the needs of those folks, we can be very specific, and being able to tailor a plan that's going to help those folks be ready when the opportunity comes.
Yeah. Now, that to me is super interesting. And, there's just a little bit of a tangent, but I just want to bring it up because, a lot of the time, many times we've seen it. It's not just with talent management or, identifying high performers. That's one instance of it. But you often see, even in maybe global payroll, for instance, we've spoken with folks where they say, often what happens is that leadership will come to them wanting some sort of piece of information, and they want or they need it by a certain time, and they say, well, that's going to take 25 hours to get that data. And then you reach this confluence of events, or this fork in the road where leadership understands or realizes, hey, wait a minute, we need to get something better in place so that we can get this information more quickly. And I know that's not how it came about necessarily at Valet Living to implement Quantum Workplace, but just for the people viewing this, that sometimes could be the scenario that plays out, where you can look at that as not as a loss for your department as the HR department, but as an opportunity to maybe pitch to your leadership, hey, we wanted to be able to get this to you sooner, and we could if we had ABC in place instead of XYZ. So that's, I hear your story around all the Excel spreadsheets and all this, and people are still using Excel spreadsheets. Somebody said that Excel spreadsheets they're the Keith Richards of HR departments, something like that. Oh, they said the cockroaches. I said Keith Richards. Anyway, you get the point. Like they'll always be there. It's, maybe some point 1,000 years from now they'll be gone, but in any event, yeah.
One other piece, I know I'm totally nerding out with you right now on the succession planning, but it's so impactful because in previous iterations of our conversations around identifying high potential talent, most of our senior leaders only have certain line of sight, right? It has to stop at a certain point. They can't know, in the case of our chief operating officer, it's really hard for him to know, from 400 direct reports or 400 full-time associates, 8,000 part-time folks, right? So how could he possibly have line of sight into knowing each of their stories? And so often those conversations, when we're talking about who do we want to identify for our leadership development programs? Who do we want to invest in terms of that, additional development dollars that we may have, to be able to help them be ready? Oftentimes it was the people that were just right, one level direct report down from them, or maybe a skip level. And it never really got beyond that. But now we're able to get out there and say, who are those district managers that have, just an amazing runway ahead of them? And we can bring those names to our chief operating officer and say, you don't know about Tammy, but let me tell you about her. She's amazing.
Yeah.
We can invest those dollars more strategically at a deeper level across the whole enterprise versus just that, kind of next step down from our senior leadership team.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I mean, that's such a great point. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier around, expanding the employees sort of connection to the company beyond just their manager, so you have that wraparound sort of experience. So there are many nodes now as opposed to mainly just one. And so you have a better sort of 360-degree view of the workplace and understanding of who's who and who has potential. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, is there anything around quantum workplace that you're using that we haven't covered right now?
So quantum workplace is, it has multiple modules, if you want to call them that, that folks can choose to add or remove. And the only one that we have not partnered with them on is a recognition tool, but I know it is a robust option. We had already just had a partner in place that was working for us around recognition. But as far as we are concerned, we are deep. We are full in on surveys. We're full in on one-on-one conversations. The succession planning tool, they give us some really interesting flight analytics, so potential for folks to leave us, who might be at risk in the organization. It's not saying like Brent's at risk, go talk to Brent, but we can see just based on some of those manager effectiveness scores where we might have gaps. So we can go in and be very specific to, overlay training and support and guidance around that team and that manager if we think there could be risk there. So, what I love about it, as I said a little bit ago, so apologies for being redundant, is just having everything in one place.
Yeah.
For us to be able to really have a comprehensive look at our associates from HCM or talent and performance perspective is just really cool.
Yeah, I remember from our previous conversation that you're really enamored with that particular aspect of the solution. And I think I recall you saying that may not be the reason that people go to quantum workplace, but it's probably the reason they, maybe one of the main reasons they stay with quantum workplace.
It's interesting because, Valet Living has always prided itself on kind of having our own branding. So, we have our Valet Rewards program. It's a different vendor partner, but we white labeled it Valet Rewards. We have our LMS is an outside vendor, but we call it Valet U or Valet University. Quantum Workplace is in the nomenclature of Valet Living now. So people will say, have you done your quantum this month? Or make sure that manager's on top of their quantums. So, to us, that's actually, they recognize, they see quantum as the thing that happens, not just the tool we use, but the, kind of the process itself is labeled as quantum or quantum workplace, which I just think is super fun and, different compared to how everything else is organized within Valet Living's world. So they are definitely part of the fabric of our organization now, to their credit, because they have great tools and make it easy for us to deploy them and for our folks to use them.
Yeah, that's super interesting. What are your plans for the future? Like, oh, well, hold on. I had another thought. I lost it and it came back just now, and I want to share it. As we talked about this previously, around time savings versus productivity gains, and what do those productivity gains actually comprise? And I recall talking with you around this idea that you've saved essentially 100% of your time, before state versus current state, right? In terms of all of that administrative tedium and that sort of repetitive and, sort of, not so pleasant work, right? To follow all this stuff. But it's, today you're not left with, like downtime. Like you've been able to really convert that. So, if we were in the parlance of a say, an accounting spreadsheet, we'd say that it resulted in a X percentage of productivity gain, which would be, you know, the amount of time you saved, which you said was about 100%, which is not surprising. I like to call it the paperlithic era. People who move away from that no tech or very little tech to something modern. But in the thinking that, maybe you're not spending exactly the same amount of time on something more productive. So we might say 70% of that amount of time that would translate to productivity gain. And that would be the end of the discussion if we were talking about an accounting spreadsheet, right? But what we're really interested in, what's so fascinating about our conversation previously is we really got into, and we got into it today also, all of the things that you're able to do now. So what does that what does that productivity gain actually entail? And it's so much that you're doing now. So you're able, I think you said you're able to invest. It's a time investment now as opposed to maybe a time suck.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, my time now, when I think about these performance conversations, is listening to the needs of the business, figuring out what is the conversation that needs to be happening, because it's the same conversation across the whole business. Think of the power of that, right? If we have 400 managers or 800 managers talking to, all of their folks about the same topic every month. The power of that conversation is amazing to shift or change, something that might be happening in the business. So my time is really spent investing in trying to figure out what's the conversation that we need to be having to be the business that we want to be tomorrow and the day after that. And so instead of, trying to chase down an administratively burdensome process, all of my time is spent really on the strategic side of planning for and mapping those conversations so that at the end of the year, we've gotten, I like the term, the kind of that storybook of performance. We've got 12 conversations that reflect 12 different moments in time in the business that show where we created connection points between the needs and desires of the business and the associate. And we also collected really important information about the needs and desires of the associate. What is it? What do they want for themselves? What's top of mind for them? Are there things happening in their world that we need to understand and maybe shift our expectations in the moment to be able to honor what's happening for them? And it just is it's so much more rich, time spent. So I know you and I talked about, do the managers actually save time? Do they save time through this process? Probably not, because they're doing these conversations every single month. But are they creating more efficient associates that are happier, that are going to stay longer, that are going to have a more trusting and deep relationship with their manager? Worth it, right? Worth it perspective.
Oh, that's such a great point. Recreating efficiencies in the product, right? Yeah, yeah. That's a huge point. That's an awesome point. I love that one. Yeah, I'm gonna write that down. Yeah, because if you're yeah, you may not be saving time because you're doing something that's higher level. You've saved yourself the time doing something that's low level, maybe low impact, just because it's inefficient for you, and you may be spending the same amount of time on something higher level. So it's an investment, and you're not able to do other things too, maybe because you're still focused on the same thing, but you are creating efficiencies in the outcome of your employees. Yeah. Yeah, and effectiveness. I love that. This has been such a great conversation, Nicole. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Brent. I'm just so proud of how far we've come, of these couple of years, and no, it absolutely couldn't have happened without Quantum. So very thankful for Quantum Workplace and their constant evolution of their tools. And so just very, very excited to be able to share it with the world today through your podcast.
Oh, it's so evident. I mean, yeah, they've really helped your group transform. It's just a fantastic story around transforming performance development and all of that. So glad that you were able to share it with us. Thank you again so much.
Thank you.